There was a time before Rome had a name, before its stones held memory, before its hills echoed with footsteps. The land was quiet then, broken only by the slow and patient movement of the Tiber River as it curved through earth that did not yet know it would become the center of a world. The wind touched the grass softly, as if whispering secrets that had not yet happened. No one could see the future waiting there. No one could feel the weight of history sleeping beneath the soil. In those days, destiny came not as a king, not as an army, but as two crying infants abandoned to die. They were twins, Romulus and Remus, born into a story of fear and betrayal long before they could even speak. Their bloodline was royal, but royal blood often attracts danger. A ruler afraid of losing power had ordered that the children be taken away, removed from the world like a mistake that needed to be erased. And so they were carried to the river, wrapped in helplessness, and left at the edge of death. The river did not take them. Instead, the current slowed, as if even nature itself refused to let their story end before it began. The basket that held them rested near the roots of a fig tree, where life and death stood face to face. And then came a creature that should have been their end, but instead became their beginning, a she-wolf. She approached with hunger in her body, but something else in her eyes. She did not see prey. She saw life. The wolf lowered herself beside the children and allowed them to feed. She guarded them, protected them, and warmed them under her breath and fur. In that strange moment, the line between wild and human blurred, and the city that would one day rule the world was being protected by a creature that belonged to the forest. Later, a shepherd discovered them. He did not know they would shape history. To him, they were simply children who needed a home. He raised them with his wife, giving them names, teaching them to walk, to speak, to survive. The boys grew strong and restless. There was something inside them that did not belong to ordinary life. Their hearts were too large for a quiet existence. As they grew older, the truth of their origin found them. When they learned who they were, when they understood that they had been meant to die, something changed forever inside them. They did not want revenge alone. They wanted meaning. They wanted to create something that would never be forgotten. They stood together on the hills near the river and looked at the land. It was empty, waiting. It felt like possibility. Here, they said, we will build something here. But dreams can unite people, and they can also divide them. The same fire that pushes two people forward can also burn the space between them. The brothers began to argue about where the walls should stand, about whose vision was right, about whose strength would lead. Pride entered their voices. Anger entered their hearts. And one day, the argument crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Romulus killed Remus. In that single moment, Rome was born from both creation and loss. A city that would become the heart of civilization began with the silence of a brother lying on the ground. Romulus did not stop. He built the city anyway. Stone by stone, wall by wall, Rome rose from dust and grief. He opened its gates to anyone who would come, refugees, outcasts, criminals, dreamers, people who had no place anywhere else. Rome became a place for those who wanted a new beginning, a new identity, a new future. The city grew quickly, fueled by ambition and necessity. It formed rules, then laws, then systems of order. Eventually, the people decided they did not want kings. They wanted something different, something new for the world. They created a republic where leaders were chosen, where the voices of citizens mattered. It was an idea ahead of its time. It was powerful. It was inspiring. But it was also imperfect. Power gathered in the hands of the wealthy. The poor struggled. Slavery spread, quietly at first, then openly. Rome's greatness was already mixed with inequality. Even as it built roads and systems and structure, it also built divisions between its people. Still, Rome continued forward. Its armies marched. Its influence spread. What began as a small settlement became a growing force, then a regional power, then something unstoppable. War after war extended its reach across lands and seas. Enemies fell. Territories were claimed. Wealth flowed into the city from every direction. Rome became rich. Rome became strong. Rome became feared. With victory came confidence. With confidence came expansion. The city that had once struggled to survive now commanded armies that crossed continents. Roads stretched from Rome to the edges of its empire, connecting people, cultures, and economies. Trade flourished. Knowledge spread. Ideas traveled. At the center of all of it stood the city itself, crowded, loud, alive with energy. Markets filled the streets. Voices spoke in different languages. Goods from distant lands passed through Roman hands. The city felt like the center of the world. But beneath the movement and the noise, something darker grew. Power began to concentrate. Corruption found its way into politics. The republic that had once promised shared leadership began to fracture under ambition and greed. Leaders competed not for service, but for control. The system that had made Rome strong began to weaken it from within. Out of that struggle came a transformation. The republic became an empire, and at its beginning stood a man named Augustus. He brought order where there had been chaos. Under his rule, Rome entered a period of peace and stability that lasted for generations. This era would later be called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For the first time in a long time, people could live without constant fear of war. Trade expanded further than ever before. Architecture reached new heights. Art, literature, and philosophy flourished. Rome became beautiful in a way that seemed almost impossible. Massive structures rose into the sky. Among them stood the Colosseum, a place of wonder and horror at the same time. Crowds gathered there to watch spectacles that filled them with excitement. Gladiators fighting, animals battling, lives ending for entertainment. It was a place where the greatness of Rome's engineering met the darkness of its appetite for violence. Water flowed through aqueducts into the city, bringing life and comfort. Public baths, libraries, and forums became part of daily life. Rome was not just powerful, it was advanced, organized, and influential. But the empire carried contradictions within it. The same system that created beauty also created suffering. Slaves built the monuments but had no freedom to enjoy them. Citizens celebrated victories that had cost countless lives in distant lands. Some emperors ruled wisely, but others ruled through fear and cruelty. Among them was Nero, whose name would become a symbol of excess, destruction, and a ruler disconnected from his people's pain. As time passed, the empire began to show cracks. It had grown too large, too complex, too heavy to carry its own weight. The borders stretched too far. The army was spread thin. The economy struggled. Leaders changed too quickly or ruled too poorly. Rebellions rose. Outside forces pushed inward. Rome, once unstoppable, began to slow. The fall did not come in one single moment. It came slowly, like a long sunset that takes time to fade into darkness. Cities were lost. Regions broke away. Authority weakened. And finally, in the year 476, the western part of the empire collapsed. The world that Rome had built seemed to end. But Rome itself did not disappear. Instead, it changed again. Faith replaced empire. Power shifted from emperors to spiritual leaders. The city became the heart of the Roman Catholic Church. Pilgrims came from distant lands seeking meaning, forgiveness, hope. Churches rose where temples once stood, including the magnificent St. Peter's Basilica, a symbol of belief rising above history. Rome entered a new identity, not as the ruler of lands, but as the center of faith. And still, its story continued. The city did not sleep after the fall of its empire. It simply breathed differently. Where once the sound of marching armies echoed through its streets, now there were footsteps of pilgrims, the soft murmur of prayers, the low voices of people searching for meaning in a world that no longer felt certain. Rome had lost its crown of power, but it gained something quieter and, in some ways, more enduring, a place in the hearts of believers. The center of that new life grew around faith, and slowly the city became the spiritual home of the Roman Catholic Church. People came from lands far away, walking for weeks, months, sometimes years, just to stand inside the holy spaces that had begun to rise from the bones of the old empire. Among these spaces, one towered above the rest, both in size and in meaning: St. Peter's Basilica. Its massive dome watched over the city like a silent guardian, as if reminding everyone that Rome had not ended, it had transformed. But transformation is never simple. The church brought comfort, education, and a sense of unity to millions. It also brought power, political power, economic power, influence that reached far beyond the walls of Rome. And with power, as always, came the risk of corruption. There were moments in history when faith was used to guide people toward kindness and compassion, and other moments when it was used to control, to silence, and to dominate. Still, even through its contradictions, Rome remained alive. The centuries passed like waves. Empires outside Rome rose and fell. Kings and queens changed the maps of Europe. But Rome continued to stand, sometimes strong, sometimes weak, always carrying the weight of its past. Then, slowly, something beautiful began to awaken. After long years that many would later call the Dark Ages, a new light returned to the city. It did not come from armies or rulers. It came from the human mind, from imagination, from the desire to create. Artists, thinkers, architects, and dreamers came to Rome, drawn by its history and its spirit. They saw in its ruins not just a past, but inspiration. They wanted to bring beauty back into the world. This period would later be known as a Renaissance, a rebirth. The city began to transform again. Old buildings were restored. New masterpieces were created. Walls and ceilings became canvases for stories painted in color and light. Sculptures were carved with such detail that stone seemed to breathe. One of the greatest artists to walk these streets was Michelangelo. He looked at blocks of marble and saw life inside them. He painted ceilings that told stories of creation, of humanity, of struggle and hope. His work, and the work of many others, gave Rome a new kind of greatness. Not the greatness of conquest, but the greatness of creativity. During this time, Rome became a place where art and faith, history and imagination all came together. It was no longer the capital of an empire, but it was still the center of the world in a different way, a place where human potential felt limitless. Yet even in this rebirth, the old patterns of humanity remained. Wealth and beauty stood beside poverty. Power still gathered in the hands of a few. Politics and religion continued to mix in complicated ways. Rome was never a perfect city. It never would be, but its imperfections were part of its truth. As the centuries moved forward, the world outside Rome changed faster than ever before. New nations formed. Revolutions shook Europe. Ideas about freedom, equality, and identity spread across borders. Eventually, Italy itself became a unified country, and Rome became its capital once more, not as an empire this time, but as the heart of a modern nation. Life in Rome entered a new chapter. Streets filled with cars instead of horses. Electricity replaced candlelight. The city grew, expanded, modernized. But beneath all the changes, the ancient stones remained, reminding everyone that they were walking through layers of history. Then came one of the darkest chapters of the modern world, World War II. War returned to Rome, though in a different form than before. There were bombings, there was fear, there were days when people did not know if their homes would still be standing by night. Soldiers moved to the streets again, not as conquerors building an empire, but as part of a global conflict that affected millions of lives. Rome suffered, like many cities did, but it also survived. When the war ended, the city faced a difficult task of rebuilding, not just its buildings, but its spirit. People returned to their routines. Families tried to heal from loss. The country moved forward, step by step, into a future that felt uncertain but full of possibility. And so Rome entered the modern age. Today, if you walk through the city, you will feel something that is hard to describe. You will see ancient ruins standing beside modern shops. You will hear languages from all over the world spoken in the same street. You will see people living ordinary lives, going to work, meeting friends, laughing, arguing, while surrounded by structures that have existed for thousands of years. Rome today is beautiful. It is also imperfect. There is traffic that fills the streets with noise. There are crowds that make it hard to move in popular areas. There are prices that can be too high for many people. There are pickpockets who look for easy targets among tourists who are too distracted by the beauty around them. But there's also something else. There's history in every stone. There's art in every corner. There's a feeling that time itself lives there, that the past is not gone but present, breathing quietly in the background of everyday life. Rome teaches something very deep, something that goes beyond its buildings or its stories. It teaches that nothing lasts forever, not power, not empires, not even suffering. Everything changes. Everything rises and falls. But something always remains. The human spirit remains. The desire to create, to believe, to rebuild, to remember, that remains. From the moment two abandoned children lay beside a river, to the rise of an empire, to its fall, to the rebirth of art and faith, to the struggles of modern life, Rome has carried all of these moments inside it like chapters of a single long story. And the story is still not finished. Every day, new footsteps cross its streets. New memories are made. New stories begin. Rome continues to live, just as it always has, holding its past in one hand, and its future in the other, walking forward through time. Rome never truly rests. Even at night, when the noise softens and the sky turns dark blue above the domes and ruins, the city feels awake, as if every stone remembers something and refuses to forget. After the destruction and fear of World War II, Rome entered a new era. The war had shaken Italy deeply. Families had lost fathers, sons, brothers. Buildings had been damaged. Trust in leadership had been broken. But in the quiet years that followed, something steady began to grow. Not empire, not conquest, not domination, but rebuilding. Italy became a republic. Rome became the capital of a democratic nation. The power that once belonged to emperors now belonged to elected leaders. The world had changed, and Rome changed with it. In the 1950s and 1960s, the city experienced what many called an economic miracle. Industry expanded. Tourism increased. Cinema flourished. Directors, actors, and writers filled the streets with creative energy. Rome became glamorous again, not because of military strength, but because of culture. The world watched Italian films, listened to Italian music, and dreamed of walking under Roman skies. But while the outside world saw beauty and romance, daily life in Rome was not always easy. The city grew quickly, too quickly. Cars filled streets that had been designed for horses and sandals. Traffic became part of everyday frustration. Apartment buildings rose to house growing populations. Rural families moved into the city searching for opportunity. The charm of ancient alleyways mixed with the reality of crowded public transport and rising living costs. Rome became a city of contrasts. In one part of the city, tourists stood in awe before the ruins of the Colosseum, imagining gladiators and emperors. In another part, ordinary people waited in long lines at government offices, worried about jobs, bills, and the future. Near the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, pilgrims prayed quietly while street vendors tried to sell souvenirs to distracted visitors. History and reality stood side by side. There were times of political instability. Governments changed frequently. Protests filled the streets during the 1970s, a period sometimes called the Years of Lead, when political violence and extremism created tension across Italy. Rome felt that tension. Fear returned, not in the form of invading armies, but through internal conflict and uncertainty. Yet, just as it had always done, Rome endured. The city's strength was never only in its walls or its monuments. It was in its people. Romans learned to live with contradiction. They complained about the traffic, but defended their city fiercely. They criticized politics, but loved their neighborhoods. They lived surrounded by ruins of a fallen empire and still managed to laugh, to cook, to celebrate life. Food became part of the city's identity. Small trattorias filled with conversation and warmth. Families gathered around simple meals, pasta, bread, olive oil, recipes passed down through generations. In those moments, Rome was not empire or religion or tourism. It was home. At the same time, millions of visitors continued to arrive every year. Tourism became one of the city's main sources of income. People came searching for history, romance, beauty. They walked the same roads once traveled by senators and soldiers. They took photographs of fountains and statues. They threw coins into fountains, wishing silently for something more in their own lives. But tourism also brought challenges. Overcrowding strained public services. Rents increased. Some locals felt their neighborhoods changing too quickly. Pickpocketing became common in crowded areas. The beauty of the city attracted opportunity, both honest and dishonest. Still, Rome remained magnetic. The city's skyline tells its entire story at once. Ancient columns stand broken but proud. Renaissance domes rise above them. Modern buildings stretch outward. It is a timeline made of stone. And beneath it all runs the same river that once carried two abandoned infants to safety. The Tiber has seen everything: kings, emperors, popes, soldiers, artists, tourists. It has reflected fire from burning buildings and sunlight from golden afternoons. It has carried whispers of prayer and echoes of battle. Through every transformation, it continues to flow, calm and patient, as if reminding the city that time never stops. In the 21st century, Rome faces new challenges. Climate change brings hotter summers. Infrastructure struggles under the weight of millions of residents and visitors. Economic inequality still exists. Young people worry about employment. The world outside moves faster and faster with technology, while parts of Rome seem frozen in the past. But perhaps that is part of its strength. Rome does not rush. It remembers. When you walk through its streets at sunrise, before the crowds arrive, you can feel something ancient and steady. The light touches old stones the same way it did thousands of years ago. The air carries both history and possibility. It feels as if the city is quietly saying, "I have seen worse. I have survived worse." Empires fell here. Faith rose here. Art was reborn here. War scarred here. Peace returned here. The story of Rome is not a straight line from glory to decline. It is a circle, rise, fall, transformation, renewal, again and again. And maybe that is the most powerful lesson the city offers the world. Nothing stays the same. Not power, not suffering, not success, not failure. Everything changes. Yet something always continues. Rome continues. Children are born in hospitals not far from ruins older than recorded memory. Students study in classrooms built beside ancient walls. Couples fall in love under the same sky that once watched gladiators fight. Elderly men sit in small piazzas telling stories of Rome that no longer exists, while new Rome forms around them. The city is not just a museum. It is alive. It breathes through its people. It argues, celebrates, struggles, adapts. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the first heartbeat of it. That moment when she-wolf chose mercy instead of hunger, when a brother chose ambition over love, when a settlement of dust and hope dared to believe it could become eternal. Rome was never perfect. It was brutal and brilliant, cruel and creative, corrupt and inspiring. It built laws that shaped civilizations and arenas that glorified death. It produced tyrants and geniuses. It conquered nations and preserved knowledge. It fell dramatically and rose quietly. And today, as the sun sets behind domes and ruins, the light turns the city gold. For a moment, past and present feel like one. The noise softens. The shadows stretch across ancient stone. And Rome stands there, not as a legend, not as a myth, but as proof that humanity, with all its flaws and beauty, can endure beyond imagination. The story is still being written. And as long as the river flows and footsteps echo through its streets, Rome will remain what has always been, not just a city, but a living memory of everything humans are capable of becoming. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story about Rome, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more historical stories and documentaries. See you in the next video.